How's it going? My name is Trevor Hamlett, registered dietitian nutritionist for Centera Health. I'm here at the market at THRIVE Peninsula, and I'm going to give you some nutrition tips on healthy eating. One of the first things that I do when I come to a grocery store is I start here in the produce section, generally because these are the foods that tend to be the least processed, but they are a little bit more work. When I'm shopping for produce, I like to look at foods that are different colors, because different foods with different colors have different nutrients. Like this white onion, for example, is going to have different nutrients than this red tomato. But if I combine them together, it's really going to help me to get all the vitamins and minerals that I need for the entire day. One of the things I love to do, especially when shopping for fresh fruit, is to find the ones that have the most vibrant color. And sometimes I'll even take a nice sniff of one just to know that it's ripe and ready to eat. Lovely. So another thing I love to do is go to the refrigerated section where I can find a lot of freshly cut produce, especially if I'm in a pinch. So take these fresh zucchini and squash, for example, or this fresh leafy cut salad mix. I can easily put some salad dressing on this and make a quick snack or lunch. Another thing that you'll often see as well are these pre-made salads with dressings in them. With these, I'm just weary of the amount of extra salt, fat, and added sugar that comes with the dressing, so normally I will take them out and I'll just add it on myself if I'm really in a pinch. Another thing that I love to do is go to the canned goods sections. And there's a couple of keywords that I would love to show you that I really find to be useful. Look for things that say like no salt added, for example, because these things give me the hint that there is no additional salt added to them and that it's going to be a low sodium option. I will also look for, peanut butters that say natural on them, because that means that they're more than likely going to avoid trans fats and what are called hydrogenated oils. Another thing that I absolutely love to do is go to the pasta section. Pasta can be a great way to get in whole grains, especially if you're able to find 100% whole wheat. But even if you aren't able to find 100% whole wheat, pasta can still be a great lunch or dinner option, because oftentimes on our labels, you're not getting your extra salt, fat, and added sugar from the pasta itself. Normally, it's the sauces that we add to it. So if you pair it with the no salt added tomato sauce, and you cut in your own onions and celery and add in your fresh or dried herbs, you can really make a really quick and easy lunch and dinner that not only we'll enjoy, but the kids too. So one thing that I look at is the cereals option as well for a quick breakfast. And you want to be really careful with your label reading here, because I have two different cereal options that look almost exactly the same. However, the nutrition facts on them are very different. So if you look at this one here, it says sweetened crunchy flakes with raisins, oats, and honey clusters, whereas this one just says whole grain wheat flakes and wheat bran with the raisins. And when I looked at the back of these labels, I was quite surprised. They both do include whole grains, so there's this little sticker there from the Whole Grain Council that shows that both of these foods contain 100% whole grains, which is awesome. However, when I look at the labels themselves, one thing that I can see is that the sweetened version contains almost twice as much added sugar as the unsweetened version. And then another thing that was quite stark to me was that the whole grain version, the whole wheat version, the whole bran version had twice as much fiber as the other version. And so those are things that I really like to look for. I'm looking for cereals that have the most fiber that I can get with the least amount of sodium and added sugars. And another thing I'll say too is that you don't always have to go for the name brand cereals as well. So if you look at it, really you're probably getting more with this batch than you are with this one, but you may be paying almost twice the price. So just don't be afraid to get the store brand version, because oftentimes that's a way that I save a lot of money in my budget, and it still tastes just as good. If you're trying to find options that don't have any added sweeteners or added salt, you can always go for your dried cereal mix, like just plain oats, and then you can add in your own sweetener. So oftentimes I will buy plain oats in bulk, which are whole grains, and then I will add in my own dried fruit or my own honey or whatever sweetener I use, and then measure it out. And definitely measure it out, because I can add almost just as much, if not more, sugar than the store-bought brands if I'm not careful. So I always try to add just enough to get the sweet taste that I'm looking for. Another thing that can be a really quick snack is a protein shake. Also, be wary of your protein shakes as well, because you will also find a lot of added sugar and salt and added fat in those as well. So you definitely want to read your labels and look for those that have minimal amounts of salt, fat, added sugar. Oftentimes I will use the powders and then add water to it. That way I'm not adding in any extra sweeteners and things like that as well. And then even on your cereal labels, you can look for things that say sugar-free. But just be wary of the ingredients as well, because they may be sugar-free, but they may be sweetened with other things, such as aspartame, which is an artificial sweetener. And so you really want to find foods that have the least number of ingredients as possible. And there is a trick when you're reading your ingredients label. The ingredients that are listed first in your label are going to be the ingredients that are the most in your food, whereas the ingredients that are labeled later in the ingredients, they are less so. So often I tell my patients that you can tell a lot about what a food is based on the first 3 to 5 ingredients. So now I'm going to take you to the next section of the store that I like to explore, which are the protein sections. And with proteins, one of the biggest things that I like to really stress are the amount of salt and the amount of added fat that are in a lot of our foods. And so one of my favorite ways to really kind of get in protein are to incorporate beans into my diet. You can get them dried as you can here. These are going to be your most cost-effective options, but they will require a little bit of extra work, such as soaking them or such as cooking them for long periods of time. But you can also do, and I will do this in a pinch, I will do canned beans as well. But when you look at your canned beans, beware of marketing such as reduced sodium. I tend to tell my patients to avoid things that say reduced, because that does not necessarily mean that it's low in sodium. Always look for low, no salt added, because those you can be sure. And another thing I will say about beans is that they are a great source of not only plant-based protein, but they are also a great source of fiber as well. And so these are excellent to add into soups. You can mash them up and make hummus. There's a wide variety of things that you can do to meal prep these and add some variety to your diet. Another go-to I like, especially when I'm looking for a lunch option different than processed lunch meats, are my canned tuna or my canned chicken. The main thing I'm looking for here is that they say they're packaged in water, because oftentimes you will find them and they'll be packaged in oil, and that's going to add in a lot of extra fat, which is going to add in a lot of extra calories. So especially if you're looking to find things that are going to be, lower in calories, finding things that are packaged in water is going to be most ideal. And then, especially with our canned fish and our canned chicken, you want to find options that are low in sodium as well. A good rule of thumb that I tell my patients is what's called the 5%, 20% rule. And that rule simply states that if anything is 5% or less, we consider it to be low. If anything is 20% or more, we consider it to be high. So especially when I'm looking at my canned goods, I'm looking for things that are less than 20% and as close to 5% or less as possible. Another tip is don't be afraid to go low in the grocery store. A lot of your less healthy foods tend to be more at eye level, whereas some of your what I call gems of the grocery store will be kind of at the lower level. It's almost like a treasure hunt. For example, down here I have things like herring fillets and sardines, which are great protein options, but they also are very high in omega-3s, fatty acids, which are a type of fat that can help reduce inflammation, and they're really good for heart health. Again, you still want to be mindful of the amount of salt and fat that are in these options as well. And then here we have some canned fruit options. I know in the beginning I talked about you know, getting fresh fruit. But in a pinch, you can do canned fruits as well. You just want to be mindful of things that have extra syrups and things like that in there. So I'm looking for things that say like no sugar added, or things that are packaged in water. If I have to do a syrup, you know, maybe for the kids or something like that, I'm looking for things that say extra light syrup. And I'm comparing them to the ones in heavy syrup to see if there's a whole bunch of added sugars added to them. My favorite that I love to look for, though, are things that say unsweetened. Because unsweetened, typically, there are 0 grams of added sugars in them. And usually there's also minimum ingredients as well. So you're getting the biggest bang for your buck finding things like that. All right, the next place that I love to go to is the frozen protein options. Here, I'm looking for meats and things that are gonna be lower in saturated fat and also low in salt. Typically, unless there's added seasonings or sauces in there, your frozen meats are gonna be low in salt to begin with. One thing I look for is I look for lean cuts of meat, such as this 93% lean ground turkey. And I'm gonna take a second to compare it to a fattier cut of meat such as this ribeye and look at the back of the label here. For this ribeye, I'm looking at saturated fat. It says 5 grams per 4-ounce serving, whereas this ground turkey meat here has only 2.5 grams per 4-ounce serving. And that serving size is key because I don't know about you, but I hardly ever eat just 4 ounces of meat. Usually it's 8, sometimes even 10 if I'm really excited. So that serving size is really key because that saturated fat can add up very, very quickly. Another thing that I love to highlight in the frozen meat section are our fish and our seafood. Take for example this wild-caught haddock. A lot of patients ask me about wild-caught versus farm-raised, and it's really your own personal preference. However, I will say I do love that these fish are out there swimming in their natural habitat and they're wild-caught versus being, you know, in a farm-raised environment. One thing I'll highlight about our seafood is that they tend to be lower in saturated fat and also good sources of protein and healthy fats as well. So things like haddock, salmon, you know, those types of fish are really good. One thing I will say though about some of your seafood is that some of them live in the ocean. So some of them naturally have salt to them as well. So you definitely want to check the label and make sure that you know how much salt is in them before you add your own salt when you're cooking and seasoning them as well. The last thing I want to talk about is shellfish. If you're like me, you love a good steamed crab or freshly steamed shrimp, one of the most important things that I tell my patients about shellfish is getting them, you know, minimally processed, you know, wild caught if you can, but also just think about how you're cooking them. You know, are you cooking them in a lot of, you know, butter, or, you know, are you frying them, or are you just steaming them? I usually recommend just having like steamed shrimp or just lightly sauteing it, and that makes it just as good of a meal, and it's much, much healthier for you. One thing I want to highlight here at the Thrive Market is where this food is sourced from. Oftentimes, you know, Thrive will, through funding and donations, will go out and get some of this food. But there also are gifted food from generous organizations such as Food Lion or your local restaurants such as Chick-fil-A. But I also want to highlight the USDA, which also provides some of the meats at some of our markets as well. So we get lots of different funding sources here at the Thrive Market, and I definitely wanted to highlight those as well. All right, I want to take you to the drink section now because we all drink things more than water. Don't always assume that your label means that it's healthy. Sometimes it can be marketing. Would you believe it if I told you that this 1 carton of milk had as much saturated fat as that ribeye that I showed you? Well, I wouldn't be mistaken, 5 grams of saturated fat. So you want to find things that are, you know, lower in fat things. When milk is concerned, you want to look for like 1%, 2% skim, whichever one you can tolerate. And with our other drinks, like our sodas, for example, you want to look for sodas, you know, that have the least amount of sugar. And ideally, if you can find like a sparkling water, that's going to be your best bet, because they're not going to have any sugar compared to. They're not going to have any sugar compared to your soda here, which has 49 grams of added sugar versus 0 grams of added sugar. Takes a little getting used to, but trust me, it's worth it for your health. And then the other thing I want to talk about here are juices. With your juices, you just want to drink them in moderation when you can, even if they say 100% juice, because these can still be high in sugar as well. Sometimes they add sugar in there, like this high C, for example, has added sugar, and sometimes they're all natural sugars. But regardless, we want to be mindful of our sugar intake. So you just want to drink these in moderation. Oftentimes what I'll do if I have an orange juice like this is I'll drink half of it one day and I'll set it in the refrigerator and drink the other half on another day, so that I'm not getting too much. And I love to go to the grain section. My wife and I, we are definitely bread eaters, but we still try to be, healthy with it. So we're looking for grains like our breads and our things like that that are low in salt and low in added sugar and also high in fiber. So we look for things that say whole grain and things that say 100% wheat, because these are indicators that this food is going to be likely high in fiber, which it is. One slice has 3 grams of fiber and only 3 grams of added sugars, which isn't bad. And also, one more thing I'll highlight on our grains is that our whole grains are also a great source of protein. One slice of this bread has 5 grams of protein. So if I make a sandwich and I use 2 slices, I'm getting 10 grams of protein just from the bread alone. You pair that with one of those, canned fish or canned chicken, and I got almost all the protein I need for the day. Everybody loves a good cinnamon raisin bagel, but here I'm definitely being mindful of the amount of sodium and the amount of added sugar that's in there. And also, one other thing that I must account for when I'm eating things like bagels are what am I putting on there? Am I putting butter, or am I putting cream cheese, jelly? Because that, in addition to this, can really add up when we're talking about salt, fat, and added sugar. So when I'm looking for those things in the grocery store, I'm also thinking about the things that I'm going to put on them so that I can keep track of the total amounts of salt, sugar, and added fat that I'm having for each meal. We all love a good dessert, let's be real. I like a cake or a cookie every now and then, but again, I do moderation. I look at my labels, I try to find things that are, lower in fat, lower in sugar, and I try to account for that through the day with the other things that I eat. For example, if I want a slice of this delicious iced vanilla slice cake, then maybe I won't use ranch dressing. Instead, maybe I will use Italian, or I'll make my own dressing at home. So I have a little bit more room for that added sugar and that added fat without going over each day. And then also, I will look at the serving size for different things. Like this Danish cheese strip, for example, the serving size on this is 1.75 ounces, or 8 servings. So I imagine this, and I imagine slicing it into 8 slices, and then I will try to take a little slice of that and just be mindful that if I eat more than 1 slice, I am getting more fat, salt, and added sugar than I may need for the entire day. The stuff adds up, And then powdered donuts, my weakness. Who can just eat 3 of these, right? So you gotta be mindful of this as well. Look, I don't know about you, but I'd rather have a slice of cake than these powdered donuts, because I just can't eat 3. But, you just want to look at the saturated fats, the sodium, and the added sugars on these as well, and just be mindful. Moderation is key. I hope these tips were helpful. I know I talked about a lot of things, but just take the tip that resonates with you the most, the one that is easiest for you to do, and then work on that one, and then if you'd like, try another tip and just keep stacking them together. The most important part is that you're taking any step, even baby steps, to benefit and better your health. Thanks for watching.